Here we are back again, and we were going to do the questions about the first part of the presentation, which was basically the planning and drafting stage of your manuscript, Court-Martial at Parris Island, the Ribbon Creek incident. And you did mention one of the questions that I had, or one of the comments I wanted to make. You mentioned that nobody had really commented on the fact that you had used these two different perspectives to open the story. You opened the story in a very you want to draw the reader in, so you're telling the story of the drownings themselves, of that night, the events of that night. And you're not doing it from an academic point of view, or even a journalist point of view. You're really doing it from a creative nonfiction point of view, because you're recreating the events through descriptive details and dialogue, using the techniques of fiction, using the research that you gathered. That's what I understood from what you were reading and from what I have read. All the details that you provided, all the dialogue that you provided has come from the interviews that you conducted and the research that you did, correct?
Either primarily from that, in that section, or from the court-martial transcript.
From the transcript. So you didn't, in fact, invent anything in that first rendering, even Riley's point of view. You're not putting thoughts into Riley's mind or anything like that.
Well, I couldn't interview Riley, obviously.
Right.
Riley is no more, and was. But so I had to some degree, suggest what was going through, what must have been going through his mind. But I did try to. So firstly, I made clear that Riley had drowned.
Yes.
One of the people who drowned. And secondly, I try to couch it in language like, what could have been going through the mind of?
Exactly.
You know,
word choice is everything in this, so that the reader knows, because there is a very special contract between the reader and writer of truth. We have a veracity here to uphold, and the reader wants to know right from the get-go that that the writer is giving them the truth, and so you're using particular words, particular language. You could only imagine that Riley would do this, or yes. So,
what about Riley's family? Did you have to contact them for permission to use him in the book, or to make?
This is all in the public domain, so I didn't have to do that. But I actually did try to contact Riley's family. Riley was something of an orphan, actually, but I did get in touch with his sister, and he had lived with his sister before that time. Interesting little Riley footnote, and one of the reviews on Amazon of this book, one of the people who wrote in is a woman who said, I just came across this book, and I am Charles Riley was my father. And his girlfriend was pregnant with Riley's child at the time this incident occurred. So she had discovered, she said, look, I think it was called Learning About My Father.
And had you known that, you might have incorporated some of that.
I might very well have, yes. I mean, what,
look at the door you opened.
yeah.
Yeah, for her.
wow. That's another interesting point here. The historical significance of this account. Did McEwen actually give anyone else an in-depth interview such as you received from him?
The only one that I came across was, there's a book called See Paris and Die. Strange, but it was one of those late 60s, early 70s books of, you know, anti-military type of thing, about some other instances of brutality at Parris Island, and then this, of course, was the keystone to it. And the authors quote McEwen, whom I think they must have called on the telephone, because he said something like, all I was trying to do was instill discipline, or something like that.
Exactly.
But there's no in-depth.
So this is, in fact, that the interview that you held with Staff Sergeant McEwen is, in fact, the only one existent.
As far as I know.
And is that in archives anywhere? Your recording, you said that you recorded it. Is it in Parris Island Museum, or?
I have the recording and I have the transcript. I had a transcript made of that. I have it with my.
Piece of the museum.
It probably should. I haven't ever talked to Steve Wise about it.
They've got Don Imus's picture up down there. So why can't they have your genius?
No, it really
Put me
is
on
an
another
important.
wall.
It really is an important.
Probably is.
It's important information. It's an important document, and the recording itself is, I mean, it's priceless. And it really should either be in the Marine Corps Museum or the Parris Island Museum. I mean, that's just my personal opinion.
I can't even get them to carry this book at the big museum at Quantico.
They won't carry the book at Quantico still. That's something we can get into in just a minute with the publishing, because I know that you've had as much difficulty, more so, because you've been doing it longer, with getting your book into Marine Corps exchanges, into Marine Corps teaching programs, into the Marine Corps Museum, and just as we have with the Milspeak Anthology. And it's quite interesting trying to decide or wonder about why is this happening when this is so important. Now, one of the things that you came up with, that you discussed, was the fact that you, as a writer and a researcher, you decided to touch upon the controversial issues that are involved in this incident. And one of those, of course, is brutality. But the point that I wanted to make is that you have done, from an academic standpoint, you have completed a classic interdisciplinary approach to this, I believe. And that is that you did the research, you did your survey of the literature, so to speak, with all the interviewing and the evidence and whatever. And you analyzed this situation thoroughly, and then you completed a synthesis, because you say at the end of this book you present your own opinion of what happened and the circumstances surrounding it, the outcomes. So I think that that's really wonderful that you've done this in a creative way. Another thing I think that's really important here to note is that in doing this, you've got Chesty Puller, who's one of the major figures in the military. Why did he come? Why did he come to McEwen's defense? Why did Chesty Puller?
Because he was a Marine.
Wait.
Oh.
Why did he decide to come down here to Parris Island?
Are you asking me that?
Yes.
Or is this a general question? What's your answer?
Because he was a Marine. That was the only reason. He didn't know him personally.
Staff NCO in trouble. I'll give him a hand.
Right, right.
And he was he still on active duty at the
Oh,
time? I don't
right.
remember. I should know
He's
this.
just retired.
He had just retired.
You know, they called him up at his home. McEwen's brother-in-law is a lawyer, and he was down here working with Berman, and he was detailed to call Puller and see if he could get him to come testify. And he told me, I interviewed him too. He said, I talked to his wife, and he said, I still remember her saying, Chesty, the phone for you. And Chesty came in, and of course he's as gruff as can be, and said, so you need me? Said, all right, I'll be there. Of course, I'm sure he was delighted with any excuse to put his uniform back on and appear in a public forum.
What about contacting the families of the Marines that were killed?
I tried to find them, and I was only able to find the family of Riley, just Chuck Riley. And the family, he had been something of an orphan, and he lived with his sister before he went in. And I did talk with her, but she said, you know, well, Chuck was, they were a pretty ignorant family. I don't know how to put it any more than that. She said, you know, we did the best we could, and he was going down the wrong trail, and, you know, who knows what would have happened to him if he lived through this. It was kind of that.